Florida State will host several key official and unofficial visitors.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel as new customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today is another recruiting episode as some of the names of the players that are going to be coming for unofficial visits, both in the high school and junior college ranks. I'm interested in a few of them a little bit more than I thought I would be because, quite frankly, I didn't think all of these kids would be coming. Now, remember, this is just scheduled or tentative, etc. I'm just kind of going through this, picked up some news from various places, but mostly, as I say a lot on the show, I have 24/7 Noles. I use it quite a bit, but there are other sites out there too that have similar information. So anyway, going to kind of go over some of these kids, why I am or am not surprised. But overall, I just want to make a basic declaration here. Got to give credit to the remaining coaches at Florida State for their effort. Under the circumstances, I mean, you're a 2-9 football team. To get this list here, some of the key guys, color me impressed. I will give a tip of the cap to them. So I will also go over Florida State's efforts within the state of Florida this year, the good news, the bad news here in a little bit. But again, we're going to start with the kids that are visiting. So let's talk a little bit about those guys right now. I've mentioned several times, Florida State needs to hit the home run with D-line this year. Obviously, this class is not going as they would desire. That being the case, Kevin Wynn is still technically a part of the class, and he is expected to be in town. I cannot stress the following enough. If Kevin comes to the game, that is huge. This is a kid that can play early. He's well over 300 pounds, can move, and has a very high motor. That last part, to me, is the rarest quality, even more than the size. Most big guys coming out of high school don't have a high motor because they just run over kids in high school, and it's pretty easy for them, especially the young men that play at a lower level because, again, it's just less competition. Well, Kevin plays at 1A school, Greene County in Georgia, and he mauls people. But to that end, he's also a young man that's still going out there and playing hard all the time. I think he can play early at Florida State next year, and this kid that offers from Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, like everybody offered him. If FSU keeps this kid, because USC and Georgia and all these schools have come after him, that would be an enormous coup. 2-9 football team doesn't normally get arguably the best D tackle in the country. Hats off to Odell Hagens if he does show up on campus, and obviously even more so if this young man signs to play at Florida State. That is huge news for the Noles. Cannot stress that enough. The other one that I thought was really interesting is Justice Terry. This kid I know pretty well. I don't know Kevin. Justice was at Auburn last weekend. I know that. He's been all over the place with his recruitment. Committed to SC at one point. They just offered a bunch of NIL. But I knew it ended up being Auburn, Georgia, Alabama, probably. This visit, although Florida State recruited him, surprises me. It's a possibility that he's going to come. He doesn't live that far from Columbus, Georgia. It's not the easiest path to get down to Tallahassee from there. There's no direct route per se, but it's not a long drive. Maybe he comes. If he does, again, it's not the matter of whether or not he signs to Florida State that I'm so interested in. It just shows the effort. Odell is obviously a Florida State legend. I'm not surprised that he's putting in effort, but that also shows the other members of the staff are putting in effort too. You're not going to just get him down with one guy. There's the back office, Norvell, everybody. Again, I'm impressed. You could make an argument long-term that Justice Terry has the highest upside of any player in this class, regardless of state, position, whatever. Great kid, extremely hard worker, and just athletic as all get out. I physically watched him run down a running back that weighs darn near 100 pounds less than him from behind. You can't teach that. That's God-given. Getting those kind of kids on campus is huge. Some other names to note, Tayshawn Gelsey. This kid we've talked about a little bit. Tayshawn is a receiver / depending on how you want to rank him, flex tight end out of the Jacksonville area. Big-bodied kid, 215, 220. He plays at Riverside in Jacksonville. Florida wants him as a flex. Florida State wants him to come out and play receiver. He's committed to the Gators, but maybe that doesn't hold. We'll see. I'm curious to see how that one goes, but really talented player, not a burner, but FSU really likes big receivers. That's something Norvell's talked about many times, and obviously Johnny Wilson comes to mind. Maybe this is a kid that ends up at Florida State. They've been trending a little bit that direction. If he makes the visit, I like Florida State's chances. Mario Nash Jr., the offensive lineman committed to Florida State, is supposed to be back on campus. He's talked positively about Florida State. He's got a good relationship with some of the people on staff, the assistant line coach, among others. I'm curious if this will solidify it, and there's no doubt that he's going to play for the Noles. Sounds like it, but that's good. The one that everybody wants to know about, and I'm not sure where to rank his recruitment at this point. It's crazy. There's an article on 24/7 Noles for those of you who haven't read it. You need to check it out. It is fascinating to me. It kind of changed my perception, but I'll leave it at that. He's supposed to come. If it does happen and Florida State can convince him they have the guy they want at O-line, whether it's announced or not, they just have to tell him privately, they might actually sign him. If you'd have told me that 48 hours ago, I'd have said, that's not very likely. I'm not sure where you're getting your info, but I'm hearing differently. But based on the interview that he did, and that's all you can really go by, Florida State is definitely in this. It's not trending away near as much as I thought. He really does like Florida State. Possible that they end up with him. Shocked by that because honestly, I thought he was all but gone. We'll see if that ends up being the case. Some other players to kind of note here. Let's see. There's Ethan Pritchard. Love to see him back. He's the linebacker from Seminole High School down near Orlando. Really good player. Max Redmond allegedly is going to be here. Let's see if he shows up. If he does, all the stuff with like Mississippi State, some of those other schools can be solidified. He'll end up coming. They've got some other underclassmen. And then the official visitors are interesting. If they can get Dallas Wilson on campus, great. But from what I heard this week about what he wants for NIL, I highly doubt Florida State's going to pay it. We'll see, what have you. The kid that I'm curious about is Tariq Mallory, the wide receiver committed to West Virginia. Don't know a lot about him. Need to do a little scouting on him myself. Fascinated with defensive lineman Tylen Coleman, a JUCO kid out of Northwest Mississippi JC. That's a program that's always had good players. He's got the size. He's 280 plus. Florida State needs interior D-line help for next year. I think that would be a really big pickup. They've got Sean, and I'm not sure how I pronounce this, Perret or Perret, USF commit. He's out of Atlanta. He's not a highly ranked kid. I don't know a lot about him, but he's taken an official visit. And then the two that are really interesting, because, again, Florida State needs D-line help here. But Jesse Harold, he's out of Tampa. He plays at Gaither. He's a defensive end. He's a boomer bust kid, super athletic, 6'4", 220-ish, something like that. That kid can really run. It's going to take him a year or two because he's got some upside to him. But I kind of put him like Patrick Payton. We didn't know if Patrick was going to make it either. He was 210, something like that, out of high school. But he had the length and the athleticism that you're looking for. Well, Harold has that too. He's currently committed to LSU. I'm curious to see if Florida State can flip it. The kid that I think would be more likely is Tywan Lee. He's a Pensacola native. Obviously, Panhandle kids, it's much easier for the Noles to get because of proximity. It's just over 2 hours from Tallahassee. He's committed to Ole Miss, but they are reeling. I wouldn't be surprised. He's another kid that did an interview, and reading through that, I like Florida State's chances to getting back on campus and make some headway. That one is really fascinating. He's somewhat like Harold. I don't think he's boom or bust. I like his upside. Higher, maybe not, but his floor is definitely higher. Tywan Lee is a natural pass rusher, again, 220-ish. These are the kind of kids that Florida State got during the Bowden era, redshirted him, and 1 year later, you're like, well, who's that guy? And he's second string, and he's coming in on 3rd and 7 and creating havoc. Tywan Lee's length, burst, athleticism is tremendous. So Florida State, overall, this first group of kids they got coming in, and there could be some others, the lists always change, is pretty impressive. Again, very impressed with how much effort was put into this because you're at 2-9. I thought this weekend would be more underclassmen and underwhelming with the seniors first off, and I'm not going to go in depth on the underclassmen, but they've got some good players there too. This is a good job by Florida State. I'm very surprised, and quite honestly, thumbs up. That's pretty impressive. Next, I'm going to talk about the state of Florida, what Florida State has done well and not done well, and where some of the kids are going to go. Going to make some predictions on top prospects around the Sunshine State. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Florida State has historically made a living out of recruiting South Georgia and the state of Florida, maybe sprinkled in with a North Carolina kid, an Alabama kid, etc. But the Sunshine State is the bread and butter that has been and always will be the key to Florida State's football success. It should be. It's the state you're in. You're a program that has always done well from Miami to Pensacola. Why would that be different? Well, recently under Norvell, they've been up and down within the state of Florida. So I thought, you know what? Let's take a little bit of a guided tour through the Rivals Top 50 in the state of Florida this year. I'll just use theirs for the heck of it and kind of go through. I know most of these kids in some way, shape, or form, know a lot of their coaches, seen them play. I'm going to give my predictions on them, give some thoughts overall on them, where they're going, did Florida State mess up, etc. A little bit of backdrop for each player. Just going to go down the list and have some fun with it. So, number one is DJ Pickett. And to be honest with you, I've known DJ since he was in 8th grade. He's about as rare a talent as you can get. He's out of Zephyr Hills, just outside of Tampa. He's committed to the LSU Tigers, 6'4", 175-ish, 180. He can play corner, might be better at free safety, but he can play about anything in the secondary. He's very rare. I will be surprised if he's not a high NFL draft pick. I just don't know exactly how he's going to be used. We'll see how that goes, but very talented young man. Sadly, Florida State was never really in this. I know it wasn't for a lack of effort. DJ just didn't want to go. It is what it is. They got number 2. This is a little bit of a caveat. Michael Carroll, offensive lineman out of IMG. He's really from Pennsylvania. He loved his visit to Alabama. He told me about it when I went to IMG. They just blew him away, and that's where he's going. The third one hurts the most. Javion Hilson out of Cocoa. He was originally committed to the Noles, has decommitted. Elite pass rusher. You cannot lose kids like this, but Florida State did. We'll see what happens with that one, but you'll try to get kids like this back on campus, and I'm sure they're still trying to get Hilson to come this weekend too, but I don't think that he's going to be there, and quite frankly, that one hurts because he could have played right away. Natural twitch, very fast. We'll see where he goes, but Texas A&M, Florida, Miami, there's been all kinds of programs after him. I don't know where he's going to go, but right now, if I had to guess, it'd be the Gators, and that one hurts a lot if that's the case. Hilton Drake Stubbs, this one sucks too. They put in effort, but they didn't get it done. His brother's a walk-on at FSU, but he is now committed to Miami. Florida State flat out got out recruited in some way, shape, or form there. I don't know. Sertan's a good recruiter, so I'm not sure what the deal is, but Miami got it done. And Miami needs a lot of help in the secondary. They're terrible there, but I was a little bit surprised by that one. I know Stubbs just really liked his visit from talking to him, so that one kind of sucks. Solomon Thomas, we just talked about him a moment ago, out of Raines High School in Jacksonville, big-time player, committed to the Noles. Maybe he ends up at Florida. He did go visit LSU, but I think they're third. It's going to be Florida or Florida State. That one's one to keep a close eye on. Pretty rough. Jamie French, wide receiver, another Jacksonville kid, another kid from Mandarin. He's one of the kids that a certain Keon Coleman might have advised not to go to Florida State, by the way. He's committed to Texas. His list has changed 100 times. He was originally committed to Bama. Didn't want to go there after Alabama switched coaches, and they didn't. I asked him about it. Alabama completely dropped the ball on him. They failed miserably. But Florida State, the Keon situation kind of burned them there. Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, I think he's going to sign with Michigan. He's a kid out of Virginia, but he plays at IMG Academy. Great player. Again, I don't think Florida State was really in at the back half of his recruitment. They were in it early. They just didn't get it done. Vernell Brown, the third, committed to the Gators. He's a legacy. That's where his dad wanted him to go. But Florida State was in this, and I thought was actually leading at one point. Plays at Jones in Orlando. Really great kid. What a heck of a football player. This is one of the kids next, Dallas Wilson, that everybody's recruited. His recruitment's been wild because he's from Tampa Tech. I've known him for a long time. Elite player, big body guy that can still make kids miss. He's committed to Oregon. That's the school he grew up rooting for. It's kind of weird, but he is a Tampa kid. But Florida State, and Miami, all at one point in time or another, if not in conjunction, have thought they could flip it. He might be at Florida State this weekend. He's been at Florida. His NIL asking price is not friendly. Does it end up happening? I don't know. Phil Knight really wants to win a title. I think they'll pay about anything. I think at this point he's going to stick with Oregon. Donovan Owubade, IMG Academy. This is a kid that I thought could go about anywhere. I wish FSU would have recruited him. Remember Green, the wide receiver, played it with the Noles way back when? Kind of reminds me of that style. Just a good route runner, really slick, great kid, by the way. Catches the football away from his body, can run, gets open in the field anywhere, short, deep, long, good technique. He's committed to Missouri. He's a Chicago kid at IMG, but Missouri's terrible. I'm surprised that that's where he's going to end up. The next one's another former Florida State commitment. That's Tramel Jones. He's committed to the Gators now. He's another kid from Mandarin. FSU didn't do a good job there. Maybe, maybe not. But then again, when you're 2-9, his dad, I know, favors Florida. It is what it is. That one's rough. Zaire Addison, I know him very well. Carrollwood Day School in Tampa, Florida. He's committed to Oregon. They did a great job recruiting him. He loved his visits. The NIL was good. They out-recruited Florida State, but Florida State did put in a lot of effort. I know that from talking to him. This is one that kind of hurts, and I thought Florida State would have a better chance, especially after last year. London Merritt, originally from Atlanta, another IMG kid, committed to the Buckeyes for a long time. He's decommitted here recently. Looks like Colorado, maybe. Florida State, I don't know if they just didn't like him or whatever, but that's a heck of a football player. I think the Buffaloes are going to get him. Nashawn Montgomery, he's committed to Florida, could end up switching his commitment to Bama, I've heard. I don't know if that's going to be the case, Miami Central, but we'll see. That might be a signing day deal. Dallas Golden, FSU actually came in second for this young man, Berkeley Prep in Tampa. He's committed to Notre Dame. He wants to go play nickel. Mike Mickens, the DB coach there, might be the best DB coach in America. I get it. It sucks for Florida State losing in-state kids, but Notre Dame always gets a few of the private school players down south. That's not a shock to me. This one is interesting, and I don't know the answer here. Javon Boggs out of Cocoa has been all over the map with his recruitment. UCF is where he's committed. I've heard Florida State here recently, but I mean, he was committed to Missouri at one point. One point, he was trending to Notre Dame. It's all over the place. I have no idea where he will sign. It would not shock me if he ended up anywhere. Very wild recruitment. Chris Ewald, that's a kid out of Chaminade. It was Georgia or Miami. I don't think Florida State was ever really in it. He ends up committing to Miami. Really good football player, going to play corner for the Canes. Bryce Fitzgerald, another kid that's committed to Miami. I thought at one point that he was going to end up playing at Florida State. Now, Rivals has him listed as a corner. I don't know where he's going to play, but he can play multiple spots. If it's free safety, great. If it's nickel, great. If it's corner, great. Great kid, plays at a tremendous high school football program. They're getting ready to make another run for a state title again in the state of Florida. Columbus coaching staff is legit. That's a good football player. Hats off to Miami. FSU needs to do better in the greater Broward and Dade areas. Cortez Mills, speaking of, a Homestead kid just south of Miami, committed to Oklahoma. FSU was involved for a little while, but it is what it is. They didn't get him, but Oklahoma, I'm guessing if you're committed there this late, because they are terrible as well. I know they just beat Bama, but they can't throw the football. NIL's got to be pretty impressive there. Jarquez Carter, he lives about 30 minutes from Florida, but he's committed to Ohio State. He's from Newberry, Florida, just west of Gainesville. I don't think Florida State put in enough effort on that one, or maybe they just didn't want him. He's a smaller defensive tackle that's a one-gap guy, kind of fits Florida State's style long-term. They've always went for those guys, too, historically. I'm a little surprised they didn't go after him harder. Winston Watkins is uncommitted. He's at Venice. He's a smaller slot receiver, very athletic kid. I don't know where he's going, but I have not heard FSU with him. Carter Smith, it looks like he's going to Wisconsin. He's committed now. I think his recruitment is done. He was flirting with Florida State for a while. He wanted FSU from what I heard. Parents wanted Wisconsin. They end up winning out on that one. Elijah Melendez, this one hurts a little bit. Committed to Auburn. NIL was a huge part of it. He's number 23 in the state of Florida. He plays at Osceola. He's built like a bodybuilder, inside backer. I don't know if Florida State ever had much of a shot because, again, NIL was huge with him, but that's a really talented football player. Tarvos Alford, committed to Ohio State, could end up flipping Florida, Miami, etc. I've heard different things over the last month or so, but his recruitment's been pretty wild. He's a Vero Beach kid, another guy that can really run. I think he's more of a will backer, but he's a heck of a player. And if he doesn't end up at Ohio State, that would not surprise me. Florida State was involved early, but they have faded. Grayson Whittleton, I think I'll just stop off here, but you get the point. Florida State has missed too much on these kids. Wiregrass High School, Wesley Chapel, just outside of Tampa. He's committed to Texas. Florida State, one thing they do well is corners. Like, it's just unbelievable. They haven't gotten it done with this kid. And quite honestly, I think it's interesting that he's committed to Texas. This goes, I'm just going to make this parting shot here. This goes to show because NIL with Texas is humongous. FSU is going to have to spend a lot more. Not more, a lot more if they want to get some of these kids. You're not going to convince me that a kid's going to Texas from Tampa unless NIL is a major factor. I don't believe it. But you get the point here. Florida State did a great job with the visitors this weekend, and that's great. But overall, there's too many kids in the state of Florida, especially like those are the top 25 kids as ranked by Rivals that they're missing on. When I come back, I'm going to give some parting shots on recruiting and what's next for the Noles because they've got a really big window coming up that they've got to hit a home run on, or it's going to be very, very difficult to get this program out of the hole it's in. Can Florida State get back on track in recruiting when you're coming off a season with 2 or 3 wins? That's not an easy task, but it's the one that you have. 3 things. 1, they got to get the coaches hired. They may even make more decisions to remove coaches. I don't know. Whatever it is, it needs to be done quickly. It needs to be elite coaches. I know that's very hard. Talked about that on other shows. You want to go back and look at the coaching tab like on YouTube or what have you. But at the same time, they have to hit a home run with the 26 class. It's almost as daunting a task as I've ever brought up on this show, but that's pretty much where they're at. This class in 25, although it's going to finish a little better than I thought, it's not going to even remotely sniff the numbers that they need. They needed 20 players in this class as a bottom end number. They're not going to come close to that. Something really crazy would have to happen for that to be the case. And I'd honestly be concerned if they got to 20 because they're probably taking flyers on kids they shouldn't. Take quality over quantity is my theme. But the 26 class has to be a home run. So you got to get really good coaches. Your plan needs to be set immediately on what you're going to do schematically because you got 2 new coordinators. You can't go after kids until everybody agrees this is what we need. That's always a concern with the new staff that not everybody agrees on stuff. And then recruiting goes awry too because different coaches want different players. That gets tough. That's got to be congruent. And then finally, it's just effort. It's just effort. Florida State has not done a good job as a staff over the Mike Norvell tenure. It's not maybe, it's not could be, it's not should be. It has failed. The high school ranks have nowhere near been good enough for Florida State recruiting. Bobby Bowden would be rolling over in his grave if he knew how poorly they've done on getting kids to campus, etc., compared to his era and just in general with how recruiting is everything in college football. Bowden figured that out in the 1970s. Not many people realize, but Florida State almost won the 1980 national title. They were close. That was only his 5th season in Tallahassee. I mean, that program was terrible when he took it over. Recruiting. Florida State has to do better directly out of the high school rank. Of course, Bowden didn't have the portal. He had to start from scratch, play a bunch of young kids his first couple of years. It was rough. But by year 3, they started winning. Year 4, they were pretty good. And year 5, they could beat anybody on any field. Florida State is a unique program with the location, the history, the ability to play in a Power 4 conference, makes it easy to get recruits to at least visit. I'm not seeing enough of that. That's probably the biggest problem. The offseason, not enough elite players, the top 50 kids in the country, visit Florida State. And then, of course, again, I said it just a little bit ago, there is no friendly here. And I'm curious how this will work out, but this is how the coaches need the help. There is no shortcut. The NIL money for the high school recruits must go up significantly. There's no shortcut. They can only do so much. There are certain kids, and it's risky. I know we talk about locker room and all that. I'm not a big fan of paying a bunch of money up front. I think most schools are going away from that, from what I've been told. But like Florida, just as an example, does 1-year contracts, basically. If you hear a multi-year thing, it's a 1-year contract and it's kind of renegotiated. It's talked about bigger, but whatever. I think more schools are going to do that because of the portal. As long as you can transfer and have immediate eligibility, why would you pay upfront money? It's dumb. So there's a medium there, but Florida State was outbid, I know flat out from talking to kids, by several tens of thousands of dollars on players this year. It's just not going to cut it. So they got to do a better job up front with recruiting. That's just the basics. But the NIL has to go up exponentially. It's not one or the other. It is both. I'm curious to see how Florida State handles that, because I'm sure a lot of boosters, and I get it, are going to be like, screw you guys. You were terrible this year. Well, how many coaches get changed? Again, I don't know, but they are going to change at least 3, and both the coordinators are part of that. So let's see. Next up on Locked On Seminoles, going to have my prediction for the Florida game tomorrow. I'm going to break down the game flow and the thoughts that I have about what I want to see out of Florida State. There are a couple of players in particular that I'm interested in, the younger guys. That'll be tomorrow's show. Then Saturday, might do a little bit of just kind of like talking about all the great games. It's so much fun, the last weekend of college football for the regular season before championship weekend, because let's be honest, the rivalry games bring out the best and sometimes the worst in fan bases. It's fun to talk about. So we'll talk about that on Saturday. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. You can find me on X at FBScout_Florida. And please, if you have not already, hit that notification bell, hit that subscribe, make sure you share this podcast and comment. Love to hear what you have to say. I will see everybody on Friday. Take care.